Welcome to Mark Langley's Horsemanship podcast. I'm Jenny Barnes.
And I'm Mark Langley.
So Mark, we're sitting in a park in Brisbane, surrounded by some parakeets and lorikeets, I think. We might get some background noise, but we'll get on to these questions. The first question is from Robin. She has a horse that she fell in love with very quickly. He's 13. He's done heaps, his previous owner told her. And then the day that she got on him, she rode him briefly. No problems, however, but it was hard to get him to trot and was reluctant to move forward. From then on, she can't get on him. As soon as she puts pressure on the stirrup to mount up, his head goes up and he goes backwards. Her granddaughter can get on him bareback, but the same happens for her when he's under saddle. She can get on him from the block so long as the foot doesn't go in the stirrup. I've had a few different trainers doing groundwork with him, as have I. So much is in my head now, but still no success getting on him under saddle. Do you have any suggestion where to go?
Yeah, it's a common problem. What happened? I see this a lot of clinics that the horse is kind of so-called going pretty good, but doesn't move forward as freely as you'd like, and also carries a fair bit of tension somewhere along the way, whether it be getting on at the mounting block or putting the foot in the stirrup. Things like that, and a lot of horses that I meet get carried along with it. You know, the person carries them along with their legs all the time, and sometimes spurs and other things, and the horse isn't really thinking for itself. It's just getting sort of pushed with pressure. So over time it sort of knows what it doesn't like because it's not really thinking about what it's doing. So what we're going to try and sort of do with those horses is get them to think through situations and make decisions that are going to be beneficial for them. So even at the mounting block and when you ride, you want that horse to be thinking about what it's doing. So, but there's a lot of lessons there's one particular lesson that you could probably really look at when you're working your horse with your foot, putting the foot in the stirrup. So something I do is, and people who've sort of done a bit with me have sort of, found that for developing a horse's confidence, I'll do a lot of leading lessons, and one of those lessons that get a horse confident at passing you on each eye. And so what I do is I just get a horse to lead around me. Now, what you could do is plant yourself in the middle and just get your horse to lead a circle around you. And while that horse is leading a circle around you, and you can do that on both eyes, while the horse is leading a circle around you, you sort of watch and feel for the amount of tension it's got and where its thoughts are. So if it's hard in the eye and it's showing a lot of sort of tension in the face and things like that, then you might keep that horse walking till it sort of really connects with that feel and softens beside you, just walking around you. As I say, you can just stand in one spot. You can still move your feet so you can sort of circle, and it's almost like you're an old-fashioned hills hoist clothesline where the horse is just leading around you. You can start it off by walking a straight line and lead the horse beside you, and then eventually they go around you. It's almost as if you were standing on a mounting block, getting your horse to lead around you. And every time your horse gets a little braced, a little nervous, you put a little feel on that lead. And you can also get him to back up and come forward and things like that until your horse feels really good about it. And then I would do the same lesson on the mounting block, lead around the mounting block. So a lot of people, when they're thinking about getting on their horse, what they think about is standing, but standing is not the most important thing. It's soft movement with the horse feeling good about it. So you won't get soft movement with the horse feeling good about what it's doing. So you're going to get the horse to move around you, forwards and backwards, so the horse is soft and feeling okay about it, and his thoughts are not over there where where it thinks safety might be. And we just work there till the horse builds confidence and softness. And then once I've been do that with a horse, then I'd start to sort of put my foot in the stirrup. So something I do then is, if it depends what stage you're at. So if you can, because some people can't get their leg up can only get their leg to a certain point, and they're not as agile as others. So a lesson I teach young horses is, once that horse can walk softly around me, I put my foot in the stirrup, just my toe, and then I ask the horse to lead while my foot's in the stirrup, and I just sort of balance on one foot and pivot while that horse just walks around me softly. And I then do the same thing under, like on a mounting block I could do the same thing, but with a mounting block you'd need a pretty safe mounting block that you can put on the ground you're not going to feel unstable on. So some of those ones with the real narrow tops are a little bit winky for some people, so you might want one of those kind of just good block size ones that you can stand on, walk the horse around, put your foot in stirrup and just let that horse walk around, encourage that soft forward movement. But you're just basically getting them to feel okay there. If the horse backs up, you just go back to moving forward, and you basically give them an alternative to backing up and change that thought, step forward. And then when you're stepping on, you want to ignore, see that your horse's thoughts are there. So even if you pick up a little feel, you can see your horse just think across to you, then that's going to be really good. And when that horse is just thinking across and with you, then chances are you might be able to get on it. But every one of those sort of stages that you're working through, you're kind of letting that horse let go of what it was hanging on to, or the worry that it was hanging on to. So if it starts to worry again when you've got your foot in the stirrup, you just might walk it backwards and forwards, just taking little rocking steps and around you until it lets go of that worry. And then when it lets go of that worry, you might take that foot out of the stirrup and then back in again until the horse is soft when you put the foot in the stirrup and pull on the saddle and get on. And you just keep going through that process. But you give the horse little stages, little breaks, so when they let go of their old worry, then you soften a little, give them the space, come in again, ask again, until every one of those stages you're able to tip the worry out and have your horse connected and have its thoughts in with you. So yeah, just try that for a while, and I think that should get you in the right track anyway.
Okay, the next question is from Alison. She's been doing the challenge and watching the videos. Her pony has the opposite problem to most, in that he comes running up to you when you enter the paddock and is all over you. So I think she's referring to challenge number 1, where we start off in the paddock. How does she get him to keep a respectful distance without driving him away? He is only 2.
Okay, so the challenge, the first part of the challenge is designed just to get people to be more aware of their horses and then maybe put themselves in situations that gain the horse's interest a little bit and things like that. But more so, learn from your horses. But now this is a common, not this particular question exactly, but a common problem that we have in when people try and take what I'm trying to teach on board, is if they've been used to been driving horses away, then they're really worried about driving. Now, boundaries are boundaries, so that you've got to think of it like that. So I don't like sort of people looking at horses and sending them over there and sending them over here and sending their body parts here and there, because over time you look like this kind of bully horse that rewards the horse for escaping from your energy, and then says, come back and I'll give you some more. That will sort of make a horse quite troubled over time and cause a lot of brace and other problems that you don't want. But when a horse crashes into your bubble and doesn't understand how to approach you, then it's okay for you to have your own boundary, just like another horse would have an own boundary. Now, just because a horse tests your boundary, it doesn't automatically turn you into a bully, so you go and chase him around. But if a horse came into my bubble too often, I'd sort of grow and I'd sort of maybe bang my hands on my side, or maybe pop a flag, or bang a lead rope on the ground or on my leg, or I sort of aim for my boot so I don't hurt myself. It makes a bit of a clappy sound, and the horse goes, "Oh, I've just interrupted your boundary." But I wouldn't bring my boundary to the horse and go chasing it. I'd just be very, very clear when that horse interrupts my boundary. It's just like when a person smashes into your boundary without any concept that you actually might feel a little bit troubled by that. And young horses, it's very good for them to learn to walk up to us thoughtfully and carefully, so they've thought through it, things when they walk up. So then when they walk up to us and they sniff us, it's more of a real connection versus a, hey, I've just crashed into you, and sometimes I get food and not really sure about things. So just as soon as that horse looks like it's pushing into your boundary, be very clear, do something that makes that horse stop, and then as soon as the horse stops and is thoughtful, you reach out and then maybe let that horse make contact with you and sniff on you. But if that sniff draws it in to want to come in really close, you can say, that's my boundary again, until the horse can stand really quietly just beside you or just out there off you, and just be happy about that. But don't just keep, you know, pushing them out until they just kind of disconnect and don't want to be interested in you. It's just clearing up boundaries. The only time I'll bring a boundary a little bit stronger to a horse is if it really pushes on my boundary. Then I'll maybe step in to their boundary and sort of make it a bit more deflective, but it's not to be sort of alpha and then keep moving them away and chasing them around. It's only just to say, step off my boundary, and that's acceptable to do, and you won't damage your horse by clearing up boundaries. It's only when you start bringing your boundaries to your horses. So if you're not sure when you're using driving pressure and constantly driving them, or just clearing up a boundary, a saying that's really important is to keep in your mind is you set your boundaries and make them clear, but don't bring your boundaries to your horses. Okay, so if you think of it like that, you'll know that if a horse bounces out of your boundary, it was acceptable because it came into your boundary, but you're not going to constantly bring your boundary towards them. So yeah, so thanks for that, and I hope that clears that little problem up for you. But you won't, oh, by the way, you won't lose relationships by that. You know, you'll still have an interested horse as long as you sort of still look at the connection.
Okay, next question is from Vanessa. Hi Mark, she has a rising 3-year-old filly who's lovely to work with, but she's struggling to get her to move her feet or shoulders sideways easily. When she asks her to move across on either side by opening her hand arm in the halter, she only moves her feet once she's run out of room to bend her neck. She's very light in hand to ask forward and back. It's just sideways. Even one step seems to have a disconnect. How can I do this better?
Okay. There's always different ways to sort of lead into it. So before, I guess, instead of just sending a horse out on a circle, sometimes I do lessons with a horse that might help that horse go out on a circle better. And one of those lessons might be just getting hold of the horse a little shorter on the lead rope, and this is where I work on the forwards and the backwards and get the forwards and the backwards really soft. So I've got the forwards and backwards working really softly. When that forwards and backwards is working really softly, I might start to push across. So if the horse is just, you know, so I've got the, I'm sort of so short that I'm pretty well got my little finger holding on to the knot on the halter, you know, the crown knot on the halter, or if you just got a normal halter, just you know, where the halter attaches to the ring, where the lead rope attaches to the ring on the halter, and I'll hold there, and I'll just push across to the side, and I'll walk sideways with the horse, and the horse may bend and keep his feet still, but I'll keep a bit of pressure there until the horse kind of rebalances and shifts its front feet over to follow its head. And I'll keep repeating this, and some horses may need to go back a little first. So if their horse is more used to being on their front end and standing on their front end all the time, quite heavy, then I've got to make sure the backup's quite good on them. And then once the backup's good, I'll go back, and then I'll push across, and they'll sort of back and start moving away from me across, and I'll just move with them, hanging onto that halter knot until they loosen up the front end. And then after a while, if you're pushing it in the right, with the right intention, they'll back off and they'll reach out with that foot in the direction that their head's going. But after a while, if you push, they'll start to think across and back and step across. And that's just on a short feel. Now, for the horses that have done a bit of lateral flexion in the past and just think about bend, well, that's why you just keep with them with the bend and maybe back them off a little first and then push them across. And they may bend a fair bit, but then if you stay there and keep a bit of pressure, which is going backwards and sidewards on them, eventually they'll shift their feet until they realise that they've got to look and stay in balance. And then basically I just repeat that lesson over and over till they're really soft at the close feel, at the close contact under the chin. And then I might just go to giving them about, half a foot of rope, and then just pushing that rope across and see if they can follow the feel of that rope and just yield their shoulders across. And I'll do that on both sides, and then maybe lengthen it to a foot of rope. For sort of dull shut down type horses, not shut down but more dull, or horses that sort of block the pressure out a little bit, I might just have the flag and pop it on my leg for when I put a bit of feel there and they dull. I pop it on my leg and they just they wake up to that feel, and then they readjust their thoughts and feet to the feel. But the biggest thing with that exercise is for everyone, you've got to really look into that horse starting to think across. So that's why I don't put a lot of pressure on the opposite side to push them away, because then the horse gets fixated on the pressure that it's moving away from, opposed to thinking in the direction that you want that horse to go. So you just slowly start off short and then lengthen that rope a little, and that'll help that horse start to learn to bend and move its feet and stay more in balance, instead of bend and just stay there crooked.
So just staying on that topic of that particular challenge, because I think the next question is from Anne, and she's been working on the leading past the shoulder exercise as well. She said that she's had some success, however her horse curls his nose, and once the energy gets up he threatens to strike out. If I allow him to keep the forward, he kicks out, and I'd love him the benefit of the doubt. I know the hinds are pointed straight at me, so I'm not sure how to proceed without risking serious injury. I'm tempted to put him on a long line, but then that gets back to driving, which I'm trying to avoid. I've managed to fix the endless mouthing issue by popping the flag to change the thought. Thanks for that, that's a huge relief. So just trying to make sure that we don't cause some kind of an aggressive output in the leading past the shoulder.
Yeah. Now, when you said in your question there, go back to driving, maybe he's had a bit of driving before and you've had him out on a long line. So bad feeling can always be in horses, and depending how we approach them, it can bring bad feeling out. So if he sort of, in the past, say he could have been a bit angry, and I'm not saying this has exactly happened, but I'm just using it as an example that I've seen, as horses have been sort of lunged and driven out on a long line, except when they got a little angry, the person kind of got a bit bigger with the stick or the flag and sent them out. But the horse was kind of upset about it anyway, because they ended up fleeing away from what they were worried about, run around on the lunge, and that could have made them quite, it's going to keep the aggression in there. It's not going to let it out. It's not going to let the horse go, oh, I'm okay about that. Okay, changing a thought on a horse is one thing, but if you push an aggressive horse, you can put the aggression inside like a jack in the box, and then when another person's with the horse that's softer or a little bit different, that horse could be aggressive with them. So you have to be very careful that you get rid of the aggression by changing the feeling of the horse. So the leading past the shoulder lesson, if the horse thinks it gets, some horses anticipate lunging, so they get a little angry because they remember, but because the person's changed and they're a bit softer about their approach and they're trying to do it in a different way, the horse is starting to get a bit more, they get a bit more expression, I suppose, and because they're being listened to more, which means they're going to say, I don't really want you to get out there and start pushing me. So when the horse gets in a position that looks close to lunging, they start to get a little angry, and that's common. I see that a lot. So the way I curve that is leading past the shoulder is an intricate kind of thing, and it might take you a fair few goes to get it right, or a fair few days to get it right. I think some people, when they do it, think it's just, oh, I get the horse here and I lead them past my shoulder and they're just going to walk out over there. And some horses that are real free-thinking horses will do it very quickly. They've got a strong confidence to search around us, and if they're looking over there, they'll just walk over there and then they'll just go out on the end of a lead easy. Other horses are sort of suck-back horses who've got all their thoughts on us. So as soon as they get past the shoulder, they're looking back at us going, what are you going to do now? And that's when they get aggressive. So the whole idea with getting them past your shoulder is you're trying to encourage them to think out a little and go out over there. Now there are ways to get a horse to think across and then use a certain amount of drive that's directed in not just driving the feet way, but I don't teach that a lot on my videos, nor do I teach it a lot. I teach it a bit at clinics sometimes, but it's a little bit intricate to get it right, and I don't like people getting it wrong, so I sometimes just only do it when I'm very specific at a personal lesson or a clinic. So the leading past one, you might have to lead your horse till it lets go of some of those emotions, which means you might have to lead it and get it really soft in your hand as you're leading it past. Get it really soft so it can back up soft, it can go forward soft, and when it's walking it almost feels like you could just send it through and it'll just keep walking. So if you're leading the horse past and it still feels there's a bit of brace in there and it's still heavy in your hand and it's still got a hard eye and it's not really going to take on board going out there, then chances are when you go, it's just going to park and you're going to want to chase it. Now there is a little, like it's like pushing a billy cart up a hill, the leading past lesson. You push, and you get right at the top of the hill and it's like, oh, and there's that little bit that it goes over, then it becomes easier after that. Once the horse has gone past with its eye, past with its shoulder, its rib cage is there, then it lets go and thinks over there, then it usually gets a lot easier once it's done it once. But it's hanging onto it and just leading it till it softens and starts to get a forward thought before you feed that rope out and send it off. Another lesson, I just did with someone with a horse that's been a bit traumatised by lunging in the past, or round penning or something. It's only just a recent lesson I've done while I've been in Queensland. As a horse that if you send it past, it'd just start running around on this mechanical circle and nervous. So I did a lot of work in getting the horse to think a straight line. So something you can practice, and there's a horse actually that I just recently worked on Sunshine Coast, which I got a lady to do this. The horse wouldn't get angry, but because it was so shut down, it was a highly trained Liberty horse, but it was actually quite shut down to things and it couldn't think for itself. It just panicked and started doing Spanish walks and rearing and all these things when it couldn't find the answer. So it was quite a bit of a journey to try and get that horse to search, but once it did start searching, it became a lot softer and started to look like a normal horse opposed to this sort of shut down horse that suddenly just went, hello, I'm doing a trick, and then shuts down again. So with that horse we spent a lot of time getting it to go in a straight line and just lead out. So instead of treating it as lunging, you're treating it as if you're sending the horse out to long line. So this nervous horse that I worked, not the trick horse one, but I just let the horse lead beside me, and I kept asking it to lead beside me till it would lead with its shoulder just past my shoulder. And every time it got to that position, it would sort of try and go in front of me because it thought lunge, 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 lunge. Your horse might get to that position and go, oh, what are you doing back there? Suck back, suck back. But you just sort of stop, and then you maybe just ask a bit of energy, just softly, see if it'll take a step forward until you can walk in a straight line and that horse is just in front of you a little bit. When it gets its mojo and its movement going and starts to think forward, it might find that it wants to go out a little bit. So then you just let that rope go and let it lead out till it gets to the end of the rope and then bring it back. And it's a bit hard, but you just got to think where you want to go, get your horse out in front and then ask out in front again until it just starts to realise, oh, you want me to walk a little ahead of you, and then eventually you'll be at the rib cage walking here. And suddenly your horse will go, oh, I can think forward. And when they do, sometimes they'll want to take a little journey, and that's when you let them go out. And it is difficult, but you spend more time, I guess, preparing them to go out than you do by just going, go past me and go out. And the more times I spent preparing my horse before I sent it through, the better it'd pass out. So, yeah, I know it's keeping on the same thing to get, but if you're a bit more particular, you might notice when it lets go of that hard thought and wants to think forward.
Okay, you have a question from Donna. This is quite a long question, so just bear with me while I try and pick out the nuggets that we need to know. She's got a mare that she has started her when she was 13. So she's sort of taken her on, I suppose, in her older years. She lacked confidence initially, but has come a long way. And she is now, she's grinding her teeth. She began grinding her teeth about 4 months into her initial training when she first got her. She would grind her teeth whenever anyone came to put on her blanket, halter, saddle or bridle. She never grinds when she's being asked to do some things like picking up her feet or being handled by the vet or having shots, bandage wraps, etc. And she never grinds when she's being groomed. She loves being groomed and scratched. She has been scoped for ulcers and has had thousands put into radiographs, ultrasounds, dental work, chiro massage, and the only thing that's shown up is an ultrasound showed stifle inflammation. The vets injected that, which has helped her with the movement, but it hasn't changed the grinding. She goes very slowly with her, and she lets her know when she notices that she's upset, and her grinding has changed as the relationship has improved. So now when she saddles, bridles, girths or blanket her, she will sometimes do 1 or 2 grinds and then immediately licks and chews and yawns. And sometimes she can do 1 yawn or 3, and this has been going on for about the past 8 months. Have you ever encountered that? Will the grinding stop? Will at some point she just do the lick and chew without grinding first? It just wonders, is there pain still going on? Is there a reason for it? Is there any way that she can help her to feel better?
Yeah, I did read that question a couple of times, so I've got a bit of an idea. And it was cool how you got her started at 13, and but she obviously, there's something was missing there. I guess something went under the radar, and that's why she's grinding her teeth. Now, and I saw you mention somewhere you've been trying Cat H in it. I'm not sure what that is, so I'm not sure the Cat H thing unless I really looked it up. But so the listening to her is good, because maybe if she was listening to a little more at the start in some areas, you might have picked up on when things started to sort of start, I suppose, and then you could have sort of nipped it in the butt early. But obviously she's been sort of carrying tension in certain areas of the riding. So now just remember, there's a saying that I say to everybody that comes to clinics, and I make this sort of clear because when I first started doing clinics, I did a lot of clinics, and I was amazed how nobody was listening to their horses. And I guess because I'd spent a lot of years starting a lot of kind of unhandled horses, there was no way I could not listen to horses. So I really tried hard to understand and listen to horses. Otherwise you wouldn't get a hand on them and things like that. And then more and more over doing the clinics, I realised how many shut down horses out there, and horses that carry emotions for a long time, yet they show obedience. Now nowadays I'm getting people coming to clinics, and it's really good, but there's also the balance of things that we've got to think about. Is it's really nice that people are listening, but what I'm seeing now is people are thinking, or no, I'm not saying for yourself, but there's almost this sort of thought that listening is training, and listening is a responsibility when we're with horses. So everyone out there, so important to listen to your horses, and so it's really good that you've been listening and that's helped your horse. But the listening only helps so much in certain areas, especially for horses that have had a chronic problems and really bad red flags. Like red flags, I mean, the horse has had this pullback problem for a long time, or this problem, or a girthing problem. Some of those problems, a little bit of them can be fixed through listening, but you've got to think of it like this. The way I look at listening is us changing the environment to suit the horse's anxiety. In this respect, training is the horse changing to suit the environment to release some anxiety. So the listening has got so far, but eventually training's got to come in the sense to get that horse to. So in the case of the grinding and things like that. Now the question also was, has anyone else had this problem? I see a lot of horses at clinics that have grinding problems, and a lot of yawning and licking and chewing. So even if she's not grinding, she's carrying tension because she's doing a lot of stress yawning and licking and chewing. So there's a lot of stress, and the yawning is not always just I'm letting down and I'm relaxing now. It could be just I'm yawning and I'm still stressed and I've still got tension. Unless you see all the other signs of the horse really trickling down and feeling better, then sometimes seeing yawning is just it's just a stress yawn, and the horse will sometimes not necessarily be letting go of something. They just might still be carrying a lot of tension. So with the grinding and things like that, what you might be wanting to do is you've got to find out. I'm guessing it's a holistic approach in here, because I'm guessing it's the saddle and other things that she's not liking. So, say for instance, saddling up and the grinding at the saddle, I'd maybe put a belly rope on her and teach her to lead with a belly rope. And what that does is, instead of the mare standing there having a hard thought, so by listening to her hard thoughts and then taking the pressure away when she notices it and then coming back, you're making a little bit of progress. But when she's got a hard thought, you can distract that hard thought, and that's a far better way to get a horse to let go of something, because sometimes it can be more effective in the sense that by listening to a horse that have a hard thought, sometimes you're lingering on the hard thought, though not listening to it was making him shut down and making that stronger thought, make that thought stronger. Giving them an alternative will be giving them something to do that helps them release that hard thought and then ultimately release the tension. So that's why, like, maybe leading with a girth and things like that. So if you start leading with a belly rope, so if you put a belly rope on and she starts to grind her teeth, well, I'd step back and I'd put a little feel on that belly rope till she thinks forward and steps forward, and then she goes, and then she'll have a little change from that grinding and she'll have moved her feet. So basically, instead of sort of allowing a horse to grind, I try and get them to think and move their feet. They make a movement. So what's the old response that puts a horse to safety in the wild? The flight response, movement. So movement is probably the most positive response you want in a horse. Standing will cause grinding and a lot of other things. So when a horse is preparing for something and they're standing, they'll grind, and some horses learn to grind their teeth while they're moving because they're just moving in a mechanical way thoughtlessly. So grinding and all those things, if you can get them to have a thought change, a proper thought change, which is think and move forward and think about something, then you distract them off that thought. So if girthing was the start of the saddling process that made her start to grind her teeth, put the belly rope on her, pull a little feel on it, she's going to go, here we go, and then you just step forward and say, oh, by the way, I'm not going to put the saddle on, but I want you to lead forward to this girth pressure, and she's going to go, and she might go, and she'll release and move forward. And then the grinding might stop while she was thinking, and then she made a decision, and she would have maybe released that thought. And then you just keep leading her with that belly rope until she just leads up soft and says, oh, well, I can think forward and lead up. Now, some people will say, oh, but then my horse will move forward every time I pull the girth up. But your intention is not to move forward if you're standing still pulling it up in the air. If I pulled it like this and moved, then she's to follow it. But if I just pulled it up like I was handling and I'm looking at her, if I'm looking at that rib cage and I'm looking at it just pulling on the girth like that, my intention is not saying anything, it's just saying I'm playing with the girth. So you can get her soft at leading with the girth and things like that, and that'll also help release some of that tension with the forward thought and movement and stuff like that. And I would address the riding. I would really try and think hard about how she's. If she doesn't want to move forward very easily, I'd say she's not thinking through things, which means she might be being carried by your legs, and it might be subtle, but it still might be enough to make her feel she's not in charge of her thoughts, which means she's going to sort of shut down and be kind of hold tension. So you know, I would do a little more of, hey, you search. So maybe I wouldn't use my legs when I first ride her. I'd just steer her. I'd steer her until she lets go and starts to think somewhere. I wouldn't be using my legs all the time on her. I'd only use my legs when she's interested in going forward, and I'd put a squeeze on her and let her go towards the thoughts, things like that. And then, you know, I'd just work on her being thinking about all the things that she's doing. You might find if the riding gets better and she gets softer and more in charge of herself in the riding, but still following your feel and happy to feel, you know, you to be up there in the leadership role, then what's going to happen is she'll feel good about the riding, and then the grinding and the saddling may be the anticipation of something that's sort of not so happy. I think that's pretty well what I'd be working on till, and see how you go with that. But basically, you can distract that grinding, you can pop a flag, you can do anything like that to maybe distract her, or most importantly, which is probably even better, distraction and give her an alternative. You know, what's something else you can do instead of grinding so you can change her thought? And that's education. and because remember, everything's a balance.
Okay, this is a question from Christina. It's a mare who hates having leg on her. She's been working on centering with her, getting off and on when she's relaxed, letting her walk past her, quietly mounting, all in just a halter and bareback. She's following the reins beautifully with no bit. And I know you said do one thing at a time, either reins or legs. It's all going great until she tries to rub her legs all over her and gets her used to them, and she pins her ears, rushes off, panicked, and even wants to try and bite my legs. Even if my legs accidentally graze her, she's off like a rocket. How do I introduce my legs onto her barrel without her panicking? Do I keep turning her while rubbing my legs on her? How do I teach her the texting teenager walk if every time leg is even thought about, she's off the planet? How will she know white noise legs versus when the legs actually mean please accelerate? She's really pleased with the progress that she's made so far. It's only been 3 days. Just would like some tips on this one.
Yeah, it feels like I only spoke to you a few days ago, Christine, so you're going very good. I'm glad the help I gave you on the, I think it was the lesson that I gave you, the phone lesson that I gave you, and I'm glad that it's made sense and you're getting some progress. When I watched the video that you sent me, I figured she's troubled by the legs, and I'm glad now that since you've tried that desensitising her a little to the legs, you've found some big troubles in there, which is, I'm not glad you found troubles, but I would have felt a bit silly had I watched that video and thought she wasn't troubled in the rib cage, because I figured she was, and I figured that's why you got a lot of negative responses out of her. So the question that I just answered about leading with a girth, leading with a belly rope, that's a good one, because you can stand out on a long rope and you put a loop rope around their belly. You have to be careful with that lesson for everybody though. It's you don't, if the horse looks like it's in too much trouble, just loosen the pressure off, and you've always got to hold a lead rope on them so you can loosen the pressure off their belly. But it's a really good lesson to get the tension out of some horses, and I just basically just put a little feel on them, stand way out in front on a long rope and have the hold the lead rope there until the horse searches and tries to step forward. Sometimes you can help them a little bit with a little bit of lead rope pressure on their head, but a lot of times you want them to search, and it's just a good way of putting some pressure on a barrel and getting her to move forward, some pressure on a barrel and getting her to move forward. But before I get too deep in the question, obviously if there's really bad sensory problems around the barrel, get other things checked. I know I've heard stories of horses with ulcers and things like that. They get very, very upset around the barrel. But if it's just one of these sensory processing things that she's learnt to not like it, and she doesn't like it, then you need to work on it. Now, I had a little horse at a clinic a while ago who, if another horse was walking by or distracted her, you could rub her barrel. But if she was thinking about it, she was just like your horse, really antsy with it, really upset about it. But distracting her, if she was thinking about something else, it proved to me that she wasn't as sensory as she made out. It's just that she got used to worrying about it. It's like some people are ticklish when their senses are up. Some people, and that same person's less ticklish when they're calm. Okay, and I believe that in horses is if you can distract her, sometimes you can help them. But anyway, I just doing a girthing up lesson where I'm off track a bit. I put the lead rope around the belly and I just get her to lead up a little, so she'll soften and come forward. Eventually she'll just come forward with that lead rope softly, and all that negative tension will turn into a soft forward thought. You might have to do it for a few days until she's really happy about doing it. But you don't want to rush and forward and thinking she's escaping it. If that's the case, you've got to keep doing it until she just follows the feel of the girth, and then she gets used to that pressure. Then you go back to just putting girth pressure on her. I know this is not legs, but it's just another way of putting pressure on her barrel to get her to think about it. It also gives her an alternative to sucking back to the legs. The other thing I'd think about is when you're handling her, just start to handle a lot more around her rib cage with your hands. Okay, if she gets a little bit funny about that, sometimes I'll have a flag, and as soon as I see a hard thought, I'll just pop the flag out in front of the horse somewhere, distract them off that, and then you'll take away the pressure from a barrel and you'll come back in until she softens to that pressure. I'm giving her an alternative opposed to just listening to her snarly signals all the time, because some people can listen a lot to those horses, but it takes a long time to get that horse to let go of it because you're still lingering on that thought. So I would tend to distract the horse from it, or give them an alternative, and then work with your hands around her barrel. And then when you're doing the leg lesson, one leg at a time, okay? So when you ride her, have her bent to the inside, have your outside rein ready. If she's going to try and bite your leg, you can just distract her with that outside rein or block her with the outside rein. But just get her to walk around your inside leg where you're rubbing one leg at a time. So I'm walking a tight circle to the left, I'm going to rub my left leg on you. I'm walking a tight circle to the right, I'm going to rub my right leg on you, not both legs at once. When she gets used to coping with one leg at a time, then you just work on straightening her out and start to pedal her with two legs. And yeah, she will get a little dull to it after a bit, but after a while, when she's a little dull, then you'll say, this is my intention, go forward and squeeze her up. And you've got to get that sensory out of her before you get any decent responses. So even though she may get a little dull, as long as you can get that negative thought out of her, then you can start to train her. But yeah, good luck with it, because it is a tough one when they're really that sensitive. But if you work on all those three things and see how you go, and then maybe give us a touch base with us down the track and see how it's got, and see if we can sort of narrow it down a bit more.
So forget the slow texting teenager walk for a while.
Don't do the slow. You don't need to do the slow walk for a bit until she's just a bit better with those legs, and then you can think about doing it. As long as she can go forward to the legs, maybe the texting teenager slow walk is a little bit too much for her. And best she can do is just say go to the legs, but the texting teenager walk and that slow to fast walk is the one that will really let her know how to really listen to the legs properly when you can get around to it. But it might be getting all that trouble out of the legs first.
That makes sense to me. Thank you so much, Mark.
That's all right. It's getting a little dark now, so
thanks to everyone else who's listening. If you've enjoyed listening to Mark, you can get lots of his podcasts. Just download them on Apple or on wherever you get your podcasts from. And if you want to learn more from Mark, don't forget he's got huge amounts of training videos out there for just the 3 cups of coffee, so it's really good value. And I think we'll let the mosquitoes go and nibble someone else. Thanks so much. Bye.